Everybody, this is Scott Dudley from SaaS Startup Stories, and today my special guest is Sowmya Murthy, who's based in Los Angeles. Sowmya is a SaaS growth executive and CCO at Seven Lakes Technologies. From $4 billion global enterprises to $7 million ARR SaaS startups, Sowmya has a history of success in leading high-performance global product, sales, customer success, and marketing teams to implement go-to-market strategies that help the entry product win against software legacy companies. Welcome to the show, Sowmya. Are you ready to rock and roll?
I really am. Thanks for inviting me, Scott.
You're welcome. Let's get stuck into it then. All right, so we'll start off with your background and what initially got you interested in working with SaaS companies.
So, way of background, if you were to look at my whole career, there's been one theme that pulls along, which is I have a deep passion for mission critical systems without which you really couldn't run the business. So I've done that. I started off in the world of startup in 1999, so I'm aging myself here. In when telecommunications was deregulated in North America. And so since then, I just fell in love with what it takes to make large enterprises work. And so from there, I've touched upon defense manufacturing, and today work with a company, Seven Lakes Technologies, that focuses primarily on upstream oil and gas, an energy sector, which is just tremendous in what they are able to accomplish. So along the way, in working with even governments, right? So what I uncovered was the speed of innovation just wasn't there in legacy and what we know as incumbent companies. They weren't moving at that speed. And it just right around, I would say, the time when I stepped more into marketing and strategy leadership, if you recall, consumerization of technology was happening back then.
Yeah.
So in that time period, while I was building my career, Seven Lakes along the way was also bringing in that consumerization technology to enterprises and challenging status quo, just like Steve Jobs did when he handed everybody in a board an iPad, and everybody in the executive team said to their IT teams, you better go figure out how to make applications and hardware that don't fit in a standardized environment to come in. That changed a big chunk of enterprise systems and really broke open the door for software as a service, right?
Yep.
So the expectation of innovation could no longer be PowerPoint presentations for months upon months and then decade later or two, I'm exaggerating slightly, 2-3 years later, you get a product. That is what I saw happening. And so I knew the speed at which I wanted to move and I saw the customers wanting to move. The path was going to be software as a service. And back then, the flagship product was Salesforce. Everybody could grab onto something that really drove SaaS. Right now, it feels like that's the grandfather of SaaS technologies. So as I moved through, I just started to make my way closer to startup world and really bring in my background of mission critical systems and understanding what large transformation in big industries take and bring it into the world of SaaS. So that's been my personal path. And I would say another path that's tied along with it is I've been a co-pilot or an operational partner for CEOs, perhaps since the very first CEO who recruited me for his startup back in 1999. So I've had a very unique career trajectory, if you will.
Yeah, sounds like quite a journey. Pretty exciting.
Yeah. It has been.
All right. So with that in mind, what's it like being a female executive in exclusively male tech companies?
Sometimes isolating and most times invigorating because when all is said and done, I have been welcomed in so many different environments because when I focus on the distinction of not just being female, but being me specifically, brings to the table, the conversation becomes less about male, female, but what are the masculine, feminine strengths to the table? So there are about 5 trajectories on which I look at it. One is, how do we handle conflict? definitely different when it comes to men and women, right?
Yeah.
So how do we bring emotional aspects to the table that then permissions everybody else at the table to have that kind of conversation? A lot easier when you have a female executive at the table and resolves issue differently and, in fact, more rapidly. Because logic does not always prevail in times of uncertainty and fear, which is, true, by the way, every time in a startup, right? You're constantly negotiating that.
Yep.
Another area is about orientation on structure and how do you, is it hierarchical or is it flat? So startups and SaaS, if you notice, if I may be as bold as to claim that SaaS companies generally tend to have a more feminine approach of networked, flat-based organizations, so decisions can be made differently, or your influence patterns is less command and control and a lot more persuasive and enabling people from all aspects of the organization to step into inner authority and thereby move the organization faster. So as a female executive, I would say it's been, once I was able to acknowledge all those different aspects, they become more codified and less female male, more in terms of, wait a minute, there's a different way to do this, right? And so the more I'm able to think of it that way, the more I get welcomed into conversations, and it becomes less isolating, I should say.
Okay, I like the way you look at it. That's great. All right, so tell me a bit about the Seven Lakes product and what it provides to its users.
So Seven Lakes Technologies came to be first as a services company and made their mark in doing large scale data and systems integration. And I was recruited back in 2015. And the whole idea was to bring in transformation on a large scale. And what better way to do it than to start building SaaS products. So we built our first, we launched it in 2017, early 2017, and we're now a market leader. The brand is called Joyn, Joyn. And we ultimately, what Seven Lakes is most interested in and what Joyn does is it digitizes modern day oil fields. Right. There is just so much data that comes through the oil field that what we wanted to do was democratize that data, not just so that the executives or the accounting departments and the operations sitting in office could handle it, but so that the operators in the field driving around in trucks could also make decisions that are based on finance, that are based on production and what needs to happen in the field. So that's essentially what Joyn does. And we are now 10,000 users plus, and we are in 7 out of 20 of the top oil and gas companies. And we've just we've barely touched the surface, we feel like, even in spite of all our success, because we've established a very strong field data gathering flagship, which is so important, getting in the right data so you're not having to crank through a lot of issues later, right? And now we're going in and boldly attempting to conquer and planning to move through in production planning, production accounting, and anything that, again, mission critical. If you don't know where your inventory is, then you don't know how your business is running. And so that's what we do with Joyn.
All right, just out of curiosity, is there a lot of competition in that field?
So I'm going to qualify a lot. There are legacy companies that have a stronghold. They provide various different applications that are very specific to oil and gas industry. And there are definitely other horizontal players, SaaS players, looking to make their way in. And I would put them into 2 buckets. One, I call them the sleeping giants, that have a stronghold on the legacies that really don't have any motivation to bring around innovation, right? So where they might have 10 to 15 engineers, we have 70 to 80 on our side, and we are a much smaller company compared to, thousands of employees on their side, and we are about 100 employees deep, right? So just the ratio of innovation and R&D is abysmal. So that's one part of our competition. So winning in that space is, from a product perspective, is not as challenging. Then, of
Right.
course, there are other startups who are up and coming, but don't necessarily have our industry expertise and our services background. So we sit in that incredible middle of having had the luxury of expertise, industry expertise, but also be able to go in and move at the speed of a startup.
Okay, nice. All right, so you have a strong background in creating strong vertical niche markets and building category defining brands that beat legacy enterprise incumbents. What can you share with listeners regarding this?
I'm glad you brought that up. So I've about 3 to 4 or 5 things I wanted to share, and each one of them, while I might give examples of the current company, applies to even way back when I was working in telecommunications. It's been the same case. More often than not, the number one thing I called out the sleeping incumbents because there is no incentive for them to make that innovation happen. As a startup, if someone is coming in to an established space, to begin what I call the market cry, to get the customers to wake up and demand more and educate them on what more looks like. What should be the speed of innovation? What should be the speed at which they get support? And challenge them on every aspect of their experience of the product, where they touch the customer, and provide very specific, audacious expectations such that it wakes them up to go, wait, you're taking 6 months. This should be 14 days. So really give them the ammunition to go, this is not how it should be. This is how it should be. Which leads to my second point. Come in and have a very strong perspective on what you'll do differently, right? And by strong, I actually mean measurable. So when we first came into Join and wanted to bring that on board, our incumbents or our competition was taking it anywhere in the neighborhood of 8 months to a year, if not more, to do the following things, to even get the first set of go live in the field and get it to value. So often customers were sitting for a year to realize the value. I think we might have frozen, but yeah. So, which is, if you think about it, quite ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
That's what was happening. So we came in and we challenged ourselves and our customers and said, we can get that done. Your first go live value will happen within 8 weeks. Let's make that happen for you. And we started to prove that out. That's actually how we were able to get customers like ExxonMobil on, because the demonstration of value happened fast. Now, of course, it takes time to make sure every single field is on our platform or our product, but it's important to demonstrate value as fast as possible. Now, recently, we've launched our latest Join.ai, which has an artificial intelligence component to it, challenging our customers now. Not only can we put your data gathering system, but also your production planning, which traditionally takes 6 months to a year. And we're saying we will prove out value within 14 days. We're making some audacious claims. And not only that, if you are willing to come in and move through within the first 28 to 30 days, we will actually help you migrate your data onto our system. So, and here's how we're doing it. The core concept of, by the way, I understand how ridiculous 6 months or a year to 14 days sounds, because fundamentally what we're saying is buy as you go. The era of buying for entire years or deciding on which software to buy by doing demos and then bringing all your stakeholders in and then making that selection, and boy, I hope you made the right decision, and then going in and then sticking that collective enterprise neck on one software. What we're saying, challenging our customers, is go in, lot lower risk, but make it valuable and demonstrate value in, pick one field, pick an oil field, pick a route, pick an area, make that successful. And our competitors can't say that. Why? Because they'd have to be able to sell it much smaller denominations, if you will, units, in order to make that happen, and trust that their product is so good that it will escalate and it will expand into all other fields. So we've just basically completely changed the conversation. So you want to go into incumbent spaces where someone's already there, change the conversation completely. So that's the third piece. And I would say the fourth one is transparency.
Right.
Highly transparent, because as we build things along, for example, in enterprise, one area where customers struggle with is data and security of the data. So when you go in and you say, especially if you're in mission critical products, first thing they're worried about is, do they have access to their data? And can they do anything they want with that data? And how will it work out if you are putting new innovation and so releases are going out? So what we do that is very atypical in the SaaS space, specifically here, is we bring our customers, we have a council of customers, we bring into the fold and actually help us set our rigorous automated testing. Help set our standards of testing, help set our standard of security, so that it's really the customers dictating what that's going to be.
Yeah, makes
So
sense.
transparency is huge. Why are we having to do any of this all along? And along the way, you build community. So we have a community, believe it or not, of change makers where our customers take an hour or so of their time and demonstrate our product to interested parties. So that's the kind of raving fans we all want to create, right?
Exactly.
And
yeah.
that's what we've done at Seven Lakes.
Okay, awesome. All right, so you've obviously got a lot of experience with SaaS. So just wondering, what was the biggest challenge you've had to face during your working career, and how did you go about overcoming it?
I don't know that I've completely figured out overcoming it. I believe the challenge remains.
Okay.
In SaaS, what I have seen is the promise is the speed of innovation. So that means in SaaS, you are given the license to think ahead of what the customer would need. For example, if you're encouraging customers to move in a particular type of user experience, of not having to spend as much time in the uploading of the data, simple example, right? Then you're deliberately going about creating an experience that is completely new to the customer, more often than not. So that means you're betting that the customer can keep up with the new experience you're providing, because it's germane to how they want to use the product, not how they use it, but how they want to. Right. So that intersection of speed of change and the customer being able to keep up. A very consumer example of it is, when did anybody believe that we would all be scrolling long posts, right? Now everybody does it. LinkedIn. I mean, remember, you probably don't remember this. Again, I'm aging myself, but there was a time that nobody would have gone for that user experience because, boy, nobody wants to scroll, right? That was the traditional thinking. So that speed of change and how quickly do you onboard and bring that kind of experience change and thereby product change, and when and how will the customers keep up? I think that's the continued challenge, and frankly, a very positive one.
And it seems like the bar's always being raised for the speed too. Like it's never ending. Yeah.
Yes. And so what we're pushing up against is the human capacity to adopt that and adapt to that change. So yeah,
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right. So how do you approach building high performing go-to-market teams?
You know, the one big part I would say is to the team that I'm building to not get ahead of the customer journey, which is a very challenging problem for very high performing individuals. And for example, any complex system, and I'm attempting to simplify some of this, there's data that a user has to make sure gets into the system, and then you configure a set of complex items, right? So you make sure that it's right. And you want to make sure the data is going through appropriately and it captures all the errors so that the system or the application captures all the errors. So the human is not having to go make sure there aren't duplications and there aren't issues within the data. I just simplified a whole lot of complex stuff into 3 pieces. Now, if we were to do that, what ends up happening in high performing teams is if you end up trying to solve the error reporting or exceptions on the back end, but you really, as a team of product customer success, have not solved for how they get the data in. Is it simple?
Uh,
Is it foolproof? Are they? So now you're solving this, but boy, you don't understand why no one's going through your setup. Why you're not having success, because you're not focused on where the customer is in the journey, not where you want to go build, but where the customer is in the journey. And is it optimized before you move past into the different parts of the customer journey? I think that's the number one thing, is to keep high performing teams focused on that, the customer journey. The second part is ensuring, because there are just a million metrics in SaaS, a million metrics, right, to measure. So making sure the set of metrics that any high performing cross-functional team, be it product, customer success, they're all monitoring the exact problem that we are experiencing, the holistic journey of the customer. Are they stuck in the beginning, middle, and where is it? And how is sales and customer and product interacting to solve that problem? So for high performing teams, a big thing, now that's the strategy level, but on a human level, providing a ton of psychological safety to fail, which is challenging, because the key thing about high performing individuals, they become high performing by never allowing themselves to fail. They get really high scores. They are aces in everything they do. And boy, they come in the beginning of a product and don't have the stomach for failure. And when you don't have the stomach for failure, you don't have the mind for curiosity. And if you don't have the mind for curiosity, you are not going to see things that are disparate, that need to be connected, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be way too myopic in your thinking. And that's not what you want. So that's generally the approach. How do you create an openness or a beginner's mindset? How do you then go in and create that psychological safety? And really looking for people with very high sense of personal responsibility, because unstructured is better in an environment like ours. And so people who need to be told which direction to go tend not to perform very well in this kind of an environment. So those are the general qualities.
So sort of speaking about metrics, is there one particular metric that you think is the most important for a SaaS company, or does it sort of depend on
I really think that depends on where you are in the journey. I can tell you what it is for us at the moment. We are about 8 months ago, decided to take our SaaS game further deep. And by that, we mean deeper in. We claimed on our website, and we created a whole new website, join.ai, www.join.ai. And we said, we will enable you to come in, select your pricing, because we're not going to peg it to just the number of users. We'll peg it to the amount of oil you're producing in the well, so that it's really depending on how much you make money, we make money. Simple sounding, right? So we change the dialogue there. We change the dialogue in terms of how many people can come in and start to experience the sign up. So our measurement there was how many people are readily wanting the product and signed up for it. And wouldn't you know it, before we even soft launched, we had over 24 enterprise customers interested, signed up, ready to go. So that was a metric that sold us, oh man, there is a product market fit. The market is just disgusted with the level of support and costs that they're paying, and they're wanting this innovation. Now we're in a space where we need to see the actual success of a lot of these, I'll call them trials and pilots that need to move through. So I would say, Scott, it's a dicey question for me to answer. I really think it depends on where folks are.
Yeah, that's what most people say when I ask them. So it makes sense. Yeah. All right. So from your experience, what are the most successful customer acquisition channels, and how did you find them?
And, I would, again, over here, stay specific to our company here. And for us, and this was a big, again, change in mindset, not only for our customers, but also internal leadership. This industry works primarily on personal one-on-one relationships. And haven't we heard that before in every enterprise sale? It's all personal relationship, right?
True.
So coming in, what changed and what SaaS has changed, and thereby changed the conversation in marketing overall, enterprise B2B marketing, is There is no more B2B or B2C. Everyone who has the access to a computer is Google searching and consumerizing their ability to educate themselves, become smarter, demand more from vendors. That's already happening. So the person or the company winning the game is, are you placing your content and are you getting your customers to demand more and educating them on how to go about doing it, and thereby making it simpler when they come to you, that it's really a matter of moving them along. So because there should be no other person, no other company having the kind of conversation you're having with them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That creating the most unique conversation. So having said that, we've used organic search engine optimization as a primary driving force, coupled with strong contenting and coupled with a really strong word of mouth / repeatable referrals. So what we do is set up environments where you can come in through your own peripheral of Google search and such. And LinkedIn is a very strong base for us. Our customers tend to be on there as well. But once you get in, the way we engage with you and convert you to a believer, buyer, has more to do with plugging you into community-based events where people who are already raving fans of ours are creating a truth that they can understand and see, and creating repeatable referrals. But I will say last year fast forwarded us from a lot of physical events we were doing to primarily digital events and primarily
for sure.
digitization. So I don't know that I'm very unique in that. I think most companies went that direction.
Agree. Yeah. All right. So then on the flip side, how do you approach reducing churn and retaining paying customers?
So one of the leading differentiators for our company, given what I told you about our legacy competition, is customer service. They left those incumbents not just because of poor innovation, but also poor response to issue tickets that were playing, basic support, service level of agreement, right? And living up to that. So we have upwards of 97% retention rate in our company.
Nice.
And a big chunk of that has to do with a combination of a white glove service. And for us, what that means is a very seasoned CSM who also has a technical expertise. Given the type of enterprise data, our customers don't just look to us to say, hey, did you turn the laptop on and off, right? And I'm being slightly pejorative. And really, they look to us for having a level of data expertise. Because often what's happening on our customer side is data is changing hands and there's too much volatility in the resourcing that changes on their side. So they look to us to have a level of confidence around their data and not just our application. So a big approach that customers and SaaS companies ought to be thinking is, how do we provide a level of service that is not just saying, here's a product and good luck, but if data is a core part of it, and I need to be able to see my data within, whether it's data capturing or the reports, that SaaS companies ought to start looking at how they take ownership on the data side. So that's one of the key mantras that we've plugged in to our support mechanism. Now, what we're also doing is bolstering our product to also be notch above everyone else in terms of its data integrity, ease of uploading data, anything that gives the customer the understanding of, God, I'm not the only one that owns data. My vendor does too. So I would say that's a very distinctive difference in our approach compared to just owning the software or the software problem.
Okay. All right. Here's one I always like asking. What's your favorite business book?
You know, that's a tough one for me because I read a lot, and but this particular one I thought I would mention because it's and I will say I'm still in the middle of reading this book because I go back and I outline the hell out of so many of the chapters that it's not a quick read for me, but it's called Shakti Leadership. Shakti is an Indian term.
Okay.
And it's written by a couple of Indian authors.
Yep.
The last name is Bhat, B-H-A-T, and Sisodia, S-I-S-O-D-I-A. If your listeners are interested, I'll send the name to you so you can include that in your comments box,
Yep.
your podcast notes.
Yep.
And essentially, this leadership is about any human being should be able to lead in today's world with both feminine and masculine constructs within them. This shouldn't be only a male or a female thing. It should really be, how do we come together and resolve conflict and have multiple options of how we do that? How do we come together and structure a company that has the flexibility to be hierarchical or network-based? How do we influence people that's not just about persuading, but maybe sometimes command and control is a good thing. So to give leaders this bandwidth, right, that is neither this or that, but really a spectrum, and knowing what situation calls for what type of leadership to step in. And it just gives a very broad scope of, I think it's a good leadership book.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely get that after the call. All right. So what are you curious about or researching right now regarding SaaS and software in general?
So great question. So one of my undercurrent, I have quite a few undercurrents in my career, but one undercurrent that's, pulled me forward is over the course of time, whereas marketing was an afterthought within enterprise sales, SaaS has made marketing the forethought, and really the point at which marketing and sales interact. Customers are now far more than ever, 70+% educating themselves, and the role of the salesperson has changed tremendously. Really what we're doing is, I wouldn't go as far as to say disintermediate sales, but we're automating the buying experience, which means what? Selling becomes naturally not antiquated, but included into the way everyone behaves, not just an organization out here selling, but how do you do that from the minute you acquire all the way through adopt and the whole life cycle, right? So automating sales has been a huge point of curiosity for me. And how do you build that into the product, and how do you build that into your organization?
Okay, interesting. All right, so just to wrap up, where can people go to find out more about Seven Lakes Technologies or yourself?
Yeah, so I am responsive and available and active on LinkedIn. So please find me there. I would love to engage with you in a conversation. And as for Seven Lakes, www.joyn.ai. It is our flagship product website.
Perfect. All right, then. Thanks for being on the show, Sowmya. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Scott.